This is The Balanced Dilemma. We tackle the often uniquely, but not always, female dilemma, managing life, work, family, and self. I'm Maura Carlin.
And I'm Christy Derrico. At The Balanced Dilemma, we speak with women and men to hear their balanced stories. Our guests are entrepreneurs, reinventors, creators, executives, parents, and partners, telling us what we really want to know. How the heck did they manage that? And can you have it all and all at the same time?
Our guest today is a humorist, content creator, writer, podcaster, and mother of three who shares her humorous takes on the realities of motherhood with her million-plus followers. Known for get yourself a snack advice, Caitlin Murray's big-time adulting, however, grew out of a not at all humorous situation when her son was diagnosed with leukemia in 2016. Welcome to The Balanced Dilemma, Caitlin.
Thank you so much.
We got to ask first, how is your son doing?
My son is doing great. Thank you. He's doing beautifully. He's healthy as a horse at this point. You would never know what he has been through, which is an amazing thing to be able to say now.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Good, glad to hear it. And how old is he?
He's 11. Yeah, he's a November kiddo. So he was diagnosed just after his third birthday, December 2016, and now he's 11.
And let's go back. I'm going to rewind the clock to 2016.
Yeah.
Tell us what inspired your endeavor and what was going on.
Yeah, well, so when he got sick, obviously that's, every parent's worst nightmare, and your earth is pretty shattered at that point, and your world is turned upside down. It's very hard to sort of reimagine your life as a mother and what you had envisioned for your children and their childhood versus what you were in the midst of dealing with. Super hard to come to terms with that loss and grieving what life was before cancer. And one of the things that I didn't know when he was diagnosed was quite how long it would take for him to complete his treatment, which was close to 3.5 years. So
That's a long time in the life of a 3-year-old.
Yeah, he hadn't even been alive that long yet. So it was just sort of mind-blowing to try to wrap my head around this, what seemed like an eternity of time in front of us that we were going to be dealing with cancer. And, it was obviously an incredibly painful and difficult process. I think I learned a lot about myself certainly as a mom along the way. People ask me about my Instagram page and why I say what I say, or I'm known for saying things that might come across to some people as taboo or, pushing the envelope a little bit in some ways. And I think that it's so normal. All of the things that I'm saying are just things that a lot of people are thinking, which is another comment I get a lot. But one of the things that I took away from my experience with Callum when he was sick and taking care of him and his younger sister at that time, and then eventually getting pregnant with my third child during that process and having another in that whole time span, is that I knew that I was a really good mom. I had a lot of conviction in my ability to do really hard things as a mother, and I had been in the trenches for quite a while in a phase of life that I openly do not particularly enjoy, the baby and toddler years.
You don't?
Oh God, no. I just walked by a statue on the sidewalk on the way here, and it's there's a random antique shop a
Yes.
few doors down, and there's this statue of a mother with she's naked up top and the baby's grabbing onto her, and she's got 2 kids on either side of her clasping. And I actually took a picture of it because I think I'm going to post it on my story later and say, does this evoke a feeling of happiness or PTSD?
Right, like being able
that is a phase where they don't talk back. And there is something to be said for
But you
that.
can't go to the bathroom alone.
That is true.
Yes.
Yeah, I refer to this a lot as sort of the decimation of your autonomy, which is very difficult for somebody who is like me to handle. I really like to be free and be able to move and do what I need to do when I need to do it. And I sometimes operate on impulse that way, and to be sort of shut down in that sense, and shut down for such a long period of time with my son going through treatment. So yeah, I think that's a lot of what gave me, I guess, the courage or the braveness to say things that I felt about motherhood that were realities that might not sound as much of a glowing review of motherhood as maybe it's typically portrayed to be.
Well, it's a pretty honest view because nobody has wonderful times all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So big time adulting. I
Yeah.
mean, I gather big time adulting really is having to deal with the hard things. And that's
Yeah.
where the name comes from.
Yeah, when I named, it was actually my blog that I was writing to family and friends at the time, just about my experience with Callum, and I was sort of thinking, I don't know, I have to name this thing. What should I call it? And adulting was like a trending term people were using at the time to describe, stocking their refrigerators and washing all their sheets on a Sunday or something. And I was like, well, yeah, I got you a couple up on that one.
You had a new definition.
Yeah.
And in terms of timeline, so you're doing this blog during the experience, and then this morphed into your platform. When was that?
Yeah. So I started writing about my son, right as he was diagnosed, to family and friends, and then about a year later, I put it into a blog, and that would get shared a little bit more readily with extended members of our family and friends network and that kind of thing. And it eventually was shared with a woman who worked in editing, who's local here, a woman named Jean Kerr, and she took a real interest in it. And she sort of said, would you be interested in ever writing a book? And let me talk to the people on my publishing team and stuff. And the feedback was sort of such that the writing is fine, but this woman doesn't have a following. We're not giving out book deals to people without platforms and that kind of thing these days. And of course, anyone can write their own book. But I think I was just, at the time, I wanted a creative outlet anyway. So I decided to just, sort of bite the bullet and start my Instagram page and see what would come of that. So that's how
you
I
got
started.
So you were a pioneer with the Instagram.
Oh, I mean, I don't know if I was a pioneer about Instagram. Instagram had been around, but and people were doing a lot of stuff in the motherhood space, but most of the stuff in the motherhood space at that time that I saw was very much rainbows and unicorns
Trad wife
stuff.
kind of.
Yeah. Everybody was,
We're not a fan of trad wife.
looking like $1 million in every photo, and it was all still photos for the most part at that point too, still images and very curated and clean and tidy people. And I was like, F that. I'm not that person. So,
well, when we're back in 2016, 2018-ish, at some point you had a career
yeah.
while you had kids. What happened there? Did you continue? What did you do?
Well, when I first was pregnant with my oldest, I was convinced that I was just born to be a mother, and I was going to be a stay-at-home mom and raise my kids, and that was my life's purpose.
Is that what you thought beforehand, or it just hit you after you had your
That's
child?
what I thought beforehand. That was when I was a fake mom inside of my imagination. And then when I became a real mom in real life and actually gave birth and started walking the walk, I was like, oh my God, I need to go back to work. This is so much harder. I can't wait to get back into an office. So my boss at the time had actually given me the opportunity to stay on through my maternity leave. She said, just don't quit, stay with it and see how you feel after the baby comes. And even if you want to come back on a part-time basis, consider it, just.
What did you
quite
do?
generous.
It was amazing.
What was the career?
At that time, I was working in fundraising in a private school in the city, K through 12. And so I did stay on, and I ended up continuing to, I had a great setup. I was working part-time, 3 days a week in the city and 2 days a week at home with my kids, and, or a day from home if I needed to. She was amazing to me. It was one of the greatest work-life balance situations.
That's wonderful.
And that was pre-COVID, so it was kind of cool, really cool for me at that point. And I'm so grateful for her for giving me that option, because I think she knew, I think she kind of had a feeling how I might feel, and she was right. Yeah. So I went back to work after my maternity leave ended, clicking my heels on the way out the door at the driveway.
There's no place like home.
Yeah. And I was very lucky because I didn't have to like go back to this full-time intense situation.
It makes it easier to have
made
that.
it much easier. So that was a huge luxury for me at that point. I do feel for moms who are kind of have to rip the Band-Aid off and go right
5
back.
days a week.
Yeah, it's
pumping
really
in the bathroom.
It's crazy.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
So what happened? When did you?
So
have
I
to
had
make a
to end
decision?
up dialing it back to just becoming a full-time stay-at-home mom after my son was diagnosed. I worked for a little while after I took some time off, and then I went back for a little while, but then I was having a third child, and my son was going to be getting better, and he was going to be going back to school, but he was still super vulnerable, and we still had to get him to the hospital within an hour if he had a fever. That's a very big deal if you have a port, especially as a child. So it was just in the best interest of my family for me to be home.
So what were the discussions like, let's say, with your husband about that you deciding to be at home?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, my husband's incredibly supportive of me, and he is probably my biggest cheerleader of all time right now and doing all the things that I'm doing now. And he's, constantly telling me how proud he is of me and that kind of thing. At the time, I think he didn't want to put any pressure on me at all, one way or another, be like the decision maker behind what I would do versus working. Because I think he knew I also loved having a job, but I think he was quite relieved when I made the decision to stay back full time. There's a massive security blanket in having a parent home full time, particularly under the circumstances we were in. So
yeah, we had a guest, Gila Pfeiffer, who said when she decided to leave the workforce, what was it, that no one was getting 100% of her. And so she felt that it was just diminishing returns on all the fronts.
Yep.
So sometimes that's the decision you have to make at that time.
Yeah.
But I like these catchphrases. Let's talk about what we want to hear about. Tell me about where did get yourself a snack come from?
It rolled off my tongue one day and it just felt right. I don't know. Just get yourself a snack felt like a little bit of a metaphor for moms to take a second, take a breather, like think about yourself for a second, give yourself a snack and nourish yourself a little bit. Everybody loves snacks.
Are you a big snacker?
I actually am I would say I'm a very regimented snacker. So I'm a 3 square meals a day, 2 snacks a day type of person.
Are you really?
So yes, yeah, I like a feeding schedule. Yeah, I'm
and
like
you
a
have
baby.
your kids on
I'm
that
like
too?
a newborn. Yeah, sure. I love everybody on a schedule. I like to know what's happening.
So your kids aren't in travel sports yet?
They are.
Aha.
Yeah.
So how's
and
the
it's
schedule going?
Not great. Yeah. Yeah. I think everything sort of fell apart. So it's just certain nights of the week and days of the week. I think at the beginning of the school year, with all of the different schedules now coming into play with my kids getting a little bit older, I just had written this thing for my newsletter, like, how do people do this? Because I'm like, I don't understand when you're supposed to have dinner, when one has soccer practice at 5 and the other one has, football at 6 and somebody's got a play date in the middle. Like, when do we gather? When, what, how?
I used to do a color-coded spreadsheet, and it would really irk me when my husband would say, "What's on tonight?" I was like, I sent everyone the spreadsheet.
The spreadsheet.
Look at the spreadsheet. And then I'd go, oh, wait, I made an error on Wednesday, so maybe I don't know what's going on tonight.
But even with a spreadsheet, I still had not mastered being in 3 places at one time. You may be more talented than I am.
How do we do it?
You turn into
crazy.
a witch, and you can, get to where you need to go.
So why do you think big time adulting has resonated with so many people, and particularly moms?
I hope it's just because I show up as who I am for the most part. I'm pretty authentic and honest about the way that I feel about life, motherhood. And then also it's funny to people, I think. It's like some of these realities can feel dark and heavy and overwhelming when you're navigating motherhood at all different phases. And people want to be able to laugh about stuff.
And some of them, if you can take a step back, they really are funny.
Yeah, it is.
Sometimes, I mean, there are things
yeah,
that are funny.
half of the time it's like I feel like I'm saying things to myself. It's more of a reminder to me in the moment of like, you don't have to worry about all of this crazy nonsense. It's just,
But you're also known for dancing.
yeah.
So where does that come from?
I mean, it's just like psychosis, straight up crazy.
Are you dancing in front of the kids?
Yeah, we had a dance party this morning before school. I woke up so early this morning. My husband wakes up quite early. And for some reason, he was up even earlier than usual today at like 4 o'clock in the morning. And then I couldn't fall back to sleep. And so I felt like I lived like 7 or 8 lives by the time 8 a.m. rolled around.
I know that feeling.
And I was just like, oh my God, is it time to go to school yet?
Right.
And we passed some of that time with a dance. And
Is
dance
that-
interlude.
Does it break like a bad moment to do the dancing? I mean, when do you employ this dancing?
Yeah, I mean, I was dancing with my kids all of the time when they were really little because I think it was like a very much borderline, I might cry right now or we're going to dance. So there was definitely walked a fine line between, tears of happiness and tears of sadness in those moments. And just movement is amazing for your body to release tension. And that's sort of music is mood lifting. So
And they don't say, Mom, you're so embarrassing.
Not yet.
well, they like my daughter would definitely, but she's also like, oh, my mom has a social media following. I think that's something that's cool.
Tell us, how do your kids react to that? And let's start with your son who is sick. I assume he wasn't aware that you were posting about him when he was going through treatment.
Yeah, I mean, so I really don't post about my kids very much at all, like about anything really specific or related to them. Or I sometimes talk about Callum and what he went through in a very specific way, but most of it is general stuff that relates to parenting in, different phases of life and also just what my like a mother's experience is, like what you're feeling. So I do try to sort of keep them out of it. I hardly if ever show their faces and kind of try to keep them protected that way. But they know what I'm doing, and I show them some of my reels that they think are funny, especially like when I'm making fun of toddlers and stuff, because we have a 5-year-old in the family, and so they see how psychotic he can be at times, and they get it, and they're like, oh, "That is funny, Mom."
Well, I'm just thinking to myself, the thought of dancing in a bad moment, having also experienced medical treatment, and one time I remember my child kicking my seat the entire way from Rye down into the city, and I'm like bouncing back and forth, very unhappy. But had I turned on like a really funny song and started to dance, maybe I could have brought some humor to the situation. So I think the advice is great.
Yeah, sometimes it helps really change the mood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see that. I'm gonna try it.
Yeah, it's never too late.
Adulting problems,
Yeah.
not other problems.
Okay, and then when people think you're nuts in your car, well,
That's okay.
That's
I
okay.
think
I
I think that
mean,
about
yeah.
me anyway.
I
but-
think that if I see somebody rocking out in their car, I'm like, that is somebody I want to hang out with.
I have a feeling my kids are more judgmental because I've done that and I get them, Mom, stop that. I mean, to this day. So now you're building a brand from motherhood, and I really want to hear about that. And it is a moment for a lot of, I don't know if you consider yourself a mompreneur or an momfluencer. Very hard to say.
Yeah, I kind of hate those terms, to be honest, because I think that they're also like very gender limiting. And then if I'm a momtrepreneur, I'm just an entrepreneur. Or if I'm a mom influencer, I'm just an influencer or a content creator. Like I hate like a t-shirt that says girls rock. I'm like, no. Girls don't need to just rock separately in their own category so that you're, making them look inferior automatically by giving them this t-shirt. But I would just say that I am on some kind of a journey with my social media experience and building a brand, and sort of building a bit of a media brand around it with expanding things like a podcast. I've taken a podcast pause right now because I'm writing a book. And I have my newsletter, which I really enjoy because I just like to write. And it's a different way to reach your audience on like a, on a different level, different from the usual content a little bit. And
You can probably go a little deeper into thoughts.
yeah, it's a nice time to dissect things or really tell a story. And people kind of, I think some people really miss the written word that way too, because we're all just video right now. And so it's nice to sort of stop and read something. And it's pretty bite-sized, so it's really manageable for moms.
So whose idea was it? Did you say, okay, so now I have this following, now I can take the next step? Did someone come to you and say, we see you on social media, we'd like you to do some collaborations with us for this snack or, this vacation?
Yeah, so I work with agents now. I have two women that are my agents. They run sort of a boutique agency. They're both Canadian moms and very much like my contemporaries and really smart and knowledgeable in the space. And so I almost think of them as my business partners. We are, do a lot of strategizing around building a company and potentially, like a product and that kind of thing. My intent when beginning my social media page was never to become an influencer, and sort of hawk other people's products. So I'd like to have my own thing and just, have something I can sustain outside of social media by myself.
You mean your own physical
yeah.
products? You have
Yeah.
ideas for things that would have made parenting easier for you?
It's not really probably going to be parenting related, but, maybe a snack or something along those lines, some sort of a consumer packaged good perhaps. And then there's also like the digital world to consider in terms of other ways to expand.
So I have some questions about this book, and Maura knows this is my area where I dive in. So you're a writer, and you're aspiring to write a book right now. Do you have a schedule that you work on? What's your style? How do you structure that, or don't you?
Yeah, it's so funny. I'm really impulsive with creatively. I think it's hard to stick to a real schedule. I find like I have to be like motivated by some sort of an inspiring thought to get going, really. And then once I sit down and start, I can really turn out some words, which is nice. But yeah, I've been trying to be more disciplined about my schedule that way and force myself to sit down and just get started a little bit more. But so I am on a timeline, so I have to.
You have a
And it's
deadline?
to do it. Yeah.
It's nonfiction, so
It's nonfiction. Yeah. It's a
fiction.
collection of short stories, which is also great for me because my attention span isn't insanely long for a beginning, middle, end novel style piece of work. And it's good for moms to read,
Right.
You can pick it up and read one story before bed or something. And
Yes, Lisa
put it
Belkin,
down.
we were a fan of. She did work-life balance for the New York Times and did other things. But there's been many who have done that. And do you have like a schedule, a timeline that you're on to get this done, or?
I am. Yeah, I have to finish the book by November 2025 this year. So I'm well on my way. My goal is to finish it much sooner.
So Stephen King has a saying that you write with the door closed, you edit with the door open. That is a very difficult thing for most mothers who are writers because everyone is clamoring at the door. Can you write with the door open, or how do you handle that issue of needing quiet for creative time?
Yeah, it's hard. Sometimes it's not quiet, and I do have to just sort of zone out and do my own thing. That will usually be like in the evening, like after my husband comes home or something, and I'll sit down and do some more writing. But I try to get most of it done when they're at school. So
did you ever see this being your path? Like, would you have predicted this?
I don't know that I could have predicted this because I don't think that when you're dreaming about what your life might be like, social media was not even a thing. Yeah.
But being a writer or creating your own business, were those part of gee, that might be nice one day?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I've always sort of had a propensity to share in that way and share in a creative way. I like theatrical things and being funny and
Well, that was actually where I was leading to, because you describe yourself as a humorist, and I've always wondered the difference between a humorist and a comedian. And were you always funny?
I always think that's also such a funny question because it's like if funny just came out and like you bought some funny at the store one day and then I got funny. Yeah, I think I was like always kind of funny.
But were you the class clown? I mean, that
I was not the class clown because I was behaved, but I would always like I had, what I think, what you're really saying is like, did I have aspirations for this sort of thing? And yeah, I would like sometimes tinker with like writing stand-up sketches that I never delivered when I was in my 20s and thinking about like funny jokes a lot of the time or just laughing about little ordinary parts of life and making them into jokes and that kind of thing.
So you were not getting the superlative for a class comedian, but your friends would probably say she's funny.
Yeah, sure.
So did you have any mentors, any business owners in the family? How did it come easy to you? How would you say this came about?
I would hate to say that I don't have any mentors. I would think that I just feel that I think that I've been really supported by my family and friends and network in what I've been doing ever since I have started. And then there has been like a nice online community too that I've met through doing Instagram and, people who have reached out and asked, like, please let me help you with your book and please let me read pages if you're ready for me to read pages. And, you do sort of find your people in those spaces.
Isn't that interesting how you can find your people online?
Yeah, I never would have suspected
that.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, yes.
Yeah,
It's very. I have a writing job, and I met her online. My boss.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, it really can happen.
Yeah.
And then when you meet in person, it's like, oh, you're a foot shorter or taller than I thought. So, and that brings us to Kind of Pregnant. Like, how did that come about?
Oh, yes, I did I did some interviewing on the red carpet for the world premiere of Kind of Pregnant about a week ago. I'm like, when was that? God. I was just contacted through a contact that I made through Meta, which is they were helping host the premiere with Netflix, and my contact there had suggested me for.
That's interesting because I made an assumption that somehow Amy Schumer followed you.
She does follow me, but she had nothing. I mean, she had nothing to do with that. Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah,
So
she's
what was
so
that
funny.
like? Was it?
It was
you
so
walked the red
cool.
carpet.
Yeah,
and you did an interview.
Yeah, it was great. It was, like just even being in the same room with like I was invited to the after party and stuff, and the after party was in the Oak Room at the Plaza, and then inside of that room is like Jerry Seinfeld and Adam Sandler and Chris Rock and Seth Meyers and of course Amy Schumer and the whole entire cast and everybody else, and it's just one of those moments where you're kind of like, wow, it's weird to just be in the same room with these people that you never really in your life dreamed of meeting even. Like it seemed, what's the word I'm grasping for? Like
otherworldly.
Yeah, just like very unattainable or something,
Yeah.
So, but then I think that the more of these sort of opportunities that I land in, the more you really come to figure out like people are just people, everybody's a person. A real human.
And we face a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
Especially in parenting.
Yeah.
Which sometimes gets called when you're putting it online, sharenting.
Oh, I've
You've
never heard that.
No?
Yeah, it's new to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there things that you won't share?
I don't talk about sex really, and I don't really talk about like my relationship and my marriage very much. In a lot of detail, or I certainly I do at times, but it's mostly in a way that's very supportive and probably doting of my husband.
As opposed to complaining or
yeah.
posting about forgetting to buy something or those kinds of things.
Yeah, like I don't do the dumb dad jokes and the stuff like that.
Because it doesn't happen in your house?
I think I just don't really my marriage, my relationship is just the most sacred thing in the world to me, and that's the foundation of my family and what makes this all work. And look, he supports me so fully in what I am doing online, and there are probably not as many men out there that would have felt like comfortable enough and confident enough in their own skin to be cool with like all of the things that I've been doing online since I started. So,
Well, because I think of Eve Rodsky, who like made her husband. You're familiar with her, who basically her husband said it's okay for you to make me look like a jerk.
Yeah. Well, I think that like one of those are realities. I mean, that we all face of the mismatched carrying of the mental load and the invisible labor of what it means to be a mother.
And you experience those things too?
Of course, yeah. I mean, my husband works outside of the home really long hours. So logistically speaking, there's just not the opportunity for him to be hands-on or like part of the meal decision-making process or the carpool process as there is for me. And now that I am now fully working another full-time job, I have a more flexible schedule, and it becomes part of me. I think it comes down to like, what you expect of each other, and like this sort of mutual appreciation and acknowledgement of. I feed well off of like being validated with how much that I do. And my husband does a good job of showing me a lot of appreciation. So if that were not the case, I'd probably have a lot bigger of a problem with it. But
we had a guest, Fran Hauser, which probably all of us have some familiarity with her work. But Fran had a really good suggestion when you're doubling down and saying, oh, I'm doing all this, I feel so unappreciated. Make a list of what your partner does. And it's illuminating. You may not consider, oh, do you shovel the driveway? By the way, I don't shovel, but my husband does. And he did get up at like 4:00 in the morning and shovel today. And you need to, make that separate list, because the reality is it's probably not as you see it in your worst moment, thinking I'm doing everything. It's just a bad moment, and you got to just let it pass.
Yeah.
And learn how to redistribute softer, kinder, over time.
Yeah, totally. There was this one like week, maybe a year ago or whatever. I don't remember exactly when it was, but I was really like struggling that week and getting so fed up with all the BS of like all of the lunches and the breakfast and the dinners. Like, so what are we going to have for dinner again? And I was sort of feeling like this resentment creeping in about like my husband not having to do that. And I just was like, I gotta pull myself out of this mindset. So I asked him, like, can you please talk to me about some of the things that you have to do at work that like drive you insane, that you hate to have to do every day, like that are just really annoying for you? And he started telling me about some like Excel spreadsheet that he has to like update and fill out. And I was like, oh my God, I'd so much rather make lunches. Thank you for sharing that.
I mean, that's a really great approach where you can actually see, oh yeah, I don't want to be doing that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's just sometimes, it's easy to talk about the things that they know the kids are there. They know that they're feeding, doing all the things around the clock and for them and stuff. And then there's this whole other world of theirs that they're not vocalizing to you because it's not relatable. It's like, why am I going to bore you with the details of what I did at work all day? I'm not trying to say that moms don't deserve all the credit, but they...
No.
But I mean, really, 3 meals a day plus 2 snacks, every single day of their life.
Yeah.
And parenting doesn't end at when they go off to college or leave the house at 18, just a warning.
Right.
Yeah, no, I'm aware because I have a mother and a father who
Right.
I still am very much involved with. So,
Well, we were talking
Yeah.
about illness floating around these days with everything going around, and I had to laugh when one of my adult daughters said, and you know, Daddy was always the one to take care of the throw up. And I thought, what? I think it was maybe one time. And then I just laughed. I mean, how cute that is that that's what she thought, that he was the designated throw up police. But
yeah,
I think it might be inflated, but I'll give it that.
it's funny the way the memory works, right? Like,
Yeah, they do something more.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do something once, and that's what sticks.
Right.
It is really funny about that.
And they don't remember the one time I changed a tire, you know. And I'm not trying to be gender specific. I get, everyone's got to learn how to change a tire just in case.
So back to using the kids in your brand. I mean, you tell stories about them, or generically. Are there things you wouldn't tell? And I'm going to say that I do write a column sort of about the longer view of parenthood, and I am very careful to not tell specific things about my kids because, believe it or not, even if it happened 15 years ago, they care.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I wonder how much of that goes through your head about maybe I shouldn't share this, maybe, you know, because it's going to be out there forever.
Yeah. I do think about it quite a bit. And I also, I really don't share a lot of specifics about my kids very intentionally. So try to keep it to my experience, you know, so.
But it's hard to separate, like if your kid throws up all over the car and you post that.
Yeah,
That's
so
kind
it's
of
funny. It's nuanced. Like I would talk about that for my 5-year-old, but I wouldn't talk about that for my 11-year-old.
Got it.
Because like maybe, or my 9-year-old even, because maybe they have a friend whose mom is following me on social media and they saw that and then they saw it too. A 5-year-old is not going to be in that part of that conversation. Like none of my 5-year-old's friends are going to have, that's never going to get back to them or whatever. So there's an age at which you have to start realizing that this may be tracked back to them and they might not like that. And I try to be super aware of that as I go.
Age-appropriate sharing.
Yeah.
So I get that.
Do you follow what's going on in, I guess, legally about parents using their kids in their businesses? Because there are some states that are coming up with laws to make sure the kids are protected, whether it's making sure that money's put in trust for them. And I don't know if you pay attention to any of that, or that's relevant for you.
I've seen that.
Well, it's California, Illinois, and Minnesota if you're going there.
I think
so far.
somebody just get like convicted and in big trouble for
That one I missed.
Yeah, I think that happened to some mom account.
Oh, yes. I know exactly what you're talking about. It
Yeah.
wasn't as it was portrayed. And,
Yes, that's
yeah.
But these laws, I think the 3 that have come out so far, if a parent uses their child in more than 30% of their content,
Yeah.
they need to provide for them and put it in trust. And
Yeah, so I kind of, I mean, I would like to do that for them. And so I try to be creative about ways that I can work them in so that that's justifiable to benefit them in the long run, because they can be kind of like considered an employee of your company in that sense. Yeah, I'm aware of that, but it's a fine line to walk when
Right.
you're trying to protect your kids from social media or being like, seen on social media, but also, they're the basis of the content too. So
right,
For
it
your
is a tough line.
inspiration. But
the
I have a
inspiration,
question
yeah.
I want to ask.
Sure.
Can you have it all and all at the same time? You've had a long experience, so how do you answer that?
I'd say no. Yeah, I just don't think it's possible in my experience to have it all and all at the same time, because I do think that for women in particular, it does feel like you're a little bit one foot in every door at all times. I don't think that men experience that same pressure to be as heavily part of family
To be as present.
operations,
in it.
With
and
the
like,
CEO.
Yeah.
of the household.
It's
Yeah.
funny, I always use that term.
I know
And
you do.
even if they're, even honestly, if they're as involved and doing as much as their, female counterpart, I just don't know that there's the societal pressure on men. I mean, men get a ton of credit for doing, what women have been doing for forever. So they're,
We know that.
kind of like looking like dad of the year. Like a lot of these, like the
know.
dads now, everyone's like, wow, these dads are so involved and stuff. And it's great. And I'm so happy that they are, and that's shifting, because obviously, like, the labor has shifted a lot as well. The women working and
Right.
being, big time earners in their households and stuff now.
So if I understand you correctly, the point is that you can't do it all at the same time, because you're operating at a point that it's too invested in the family to really take and give your all to something else. Is that how I'm interpreting it?
I think at least from an emotional standpoint, it's really hard to kind of feel fully in either place at once if you're both working and taking care of your family. Maybe it's a season, like maybe that's something that I could grow more into, feeling I'm all in on, my professional part of me. But I probably not. It'd probably be forever. I don't know when that would mean. How do you guys think?
No, seasons. We
Seasons,
think of it
stages.
seasonally.
We had a guest
Yeah.
recently who talked about looking at your life in stages.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it. We get to decide whether you're invested in one thing or you're doing something else. But your project has been super cool, and I'm so happy you've been an entrepreneur, an
That's right.
influencer.
Starting a business. I mean,
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So I think those are like important
giving great
things
advice.
to
tell people how they can find you.
they can find me at Big Time Adulting on Instagram mostly, and my newsletter is called Soul Snacks. If you want to check it out, I love it.
And we should look for your book sometime, not next fall,
next
probably
year.
next year.
Yeah.
And also some kind of snack product.
Oh, yeah, we'll see. Yeah. TBD on that one, but
Okay.
yeah.
We like snacks.
Yeah, everyone likes snacks.
Caitlin Murray, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. It was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Please follow us, listen to us, and rate us on our platforms, Spotify, Apple, and our website, thebalanceddilemma.com, where you can also subscribe to our newsletter and email us your suggestions. There's no cost, but it means a lot to us.